coming to you live from Indianapolis, Indiana. We are presented by Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative and sponsored by Mass Therapeutics. My name is Gary A. Gibson, and I am your host for the next 2 hours. Let me start by saying that I don't have sickle cell disease, nor do I carry the sickle cell trait. In spite of that, I am no stranger to sickle cell. Quite the contrary. You see, even though I don't have sickle cell, it has had a very huge impact on my life. That's true because its complications took my wife from me after 12 years of marriage. It also caused her to have a miscarriage that resulted in the loss of our twin babies that she was carrying while in a sickle cell crisis. So all told, sickle cell has taken 3 lives from me, and I feel the pain of those losses every single day. I currently serve as the president and CEO of Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative, a community-based organization that has been serving people with sickle cell for over 45 years. Each day, I attempt to transform the pain of my losses into positive energy that is focused on making a difference for those who are battling sickle cell. From being involved with sickle cell for over 40 years, I'm able to say that much progress has been made, but there is still so much work to do. This show is an opportunity to contribute to the ever-expanding dialogue about sickle cell that is taking place all around the world. Our show is about raising awareness, but it is also about so much more. I like to say that sickle cell awareness is important, but we need more than awareness. Those living with sickle cell are already aware. That makes me ask, so what are we doing for them? My answer is, not enough. That's why we've named this show the Sickle Cell Action Network, because awareness without action has very little impact. We want this show to be a source of information and a call to action to help those who must live with sickle cell in their midst. We've designed the show to provide information that is beneficial to patients, caregivers, family members, and friends alike. Most importantly, we want people with sickle cell to know and understand that they are not alone. The Sickle Cell Action Network show features live guests who are healthcare providers, patients, advocates, and others who are engaged in the fight to eradicate sickle cell and ease its burden on those it affects. Today, we're pleased to have a special guest who will speak with us about her journey in obtaining a post-secondary education degree and her life as a sickle cell patient. Joining us in studio today is Dr. Nicole Law. Also joining me as today's special co-host is none other than Sherry Coleman, Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative's Director of Education and Outreach Programs. I'm happy that both of these ladies are here with us today. Before we get to today's topic, however, I want to share some of our upcoming topics with you so that you'll know what we're going to be doing. In future weeks, we will cover such topics as transition issues in sickle cell, and that will be next week, traveling with sickle cell, connecting the sickle cell community, and many, many others. So as you can see, we are serious about sharing valuable information, and we hope that you will join us every week, same time, same station. If you've missed some of our previous editions or wish that you could listen to them again, don't worry. Just go to the Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative YouTube page and you'll find them there. Now, let's get on with our show, and we'll start with this week's edition of Sickle Cell News Update. As we do every week, we share with you some stories about things that are happening with sickle cell. One of them is a story that comes to us from Uganda, and the title of the article is Atur Hospital Opens Clinic for Sickle Cell Patients. A new sickle cell disease clinic at Atutur Hospital in Kumi District is helping patients get swift and specialized care for the disease. The clinic, which began in September last year, operates every Tuesday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It is the only one of its kind in the district. Previously, sickle cell patients had to be referred to Sorority Regional Referral Hospital. When checked into the hospital last Tuesday, this is according to the author of the article, who states again, when I checked into the hospital last Tuesday, I found an assembly line of tens of children and their caretakers quietly braving the cold cement floor as they waited for a doctor. William Okello, a volunteer educator, was busy talking to the despondent-looking parents and children about the disease. He said before the clinic was started, many parents did not know how to manage the disease, and this resulted in severe complications such as skin ulcers. The clinic, headed by Dr. Sarah Asiro, is a much-needed addition to services offered at the hospital, since many children are affected by malaria in the district. Sickle cell anemia remains high where malaria is endemic. Since the clinic began, about 700 children have been diagnosed with sickle cell anemia, and we receive about 200 on the day that the clinic is held, Helen Ugawa, a lab technician at the hospital, said. The goal of the clinic is to ensure that patients start receiving treatment upon diagnosis and confirmation of the disease. Igao says children are first tested for malaria and do a complete blood count to rule out any infections. The child then takes the hemoglobin electrophoresis, a basic test for diagnosis of sickle cell anemia. The blood samples are taken to Central Public Health Laboratory for confirmation before a patient can be enrolled on treatment. According to Ugao, at least 25,000 babies are born annually in Uganda with sickle cell disease, with 75% dying before age 5. Initiatives such as opening new sickle cell clinics is one way the Uganda government is trying to curb the disease. And that's a story out of Uganda, which is a very large population of people with sickle cell disease, and one that we continue to monitor as we will go forward. Our next story is titled, Know Your Status, Mournful Mom Urges. And this comes to us from the New York Amsterdam News. And it says as follows. Burying a family member is never easy, especially when a parent buries a child. This sad chore fell upon a mother of 5, Yvette Teixeira, whose eldest daughter, Michaela, passed in August 2014. Michaela, who was 9, had been born with sickle cell anemia, suddenly became sick and was rushed to St. Luke's Hospital. She was given pain medication and sent home. The next day, she died in her mother's arms. If the hospital had just done an x-ray on my daughter, she would still be here, said Teixeira. Their lack of knowledge about the disease allowed them to send her home because the medical examiner said she should have never been discharged from the hospital in the condition she was in. Following what the doctor said, because they're supposed to know best, we brought her home, and a day later she died in my arms. Her family learned later that her spleen had rapidly enlarged, but doctors had not detected its growth. A lot of people locally do not know about sickle cell, said Teixeira. My ex-husband and I were both tested at the Sickle Cell Center in Georgia when my daughter was born, because when she was born, they found out that she had sickle cell. They missed that my husband actually had the disease. They did not find out until he almost died at the age of 34. When I was born, they did not test for sickle cell then. Behind this, I got all my children retested 3 times. I came to find out that my ex-husband also has the thalassemia beta trait, and that is something that can turn into something like sickle cell if you have 2 people that have the same trait. My children all have the sickle cell trait plus the thalassemia beta trait. When they grow up, they have to go through genetic testing before they have a baby, then make a choice from there about having kids. One of the most important things for our community is education and screening, stated nurse practitioner Andrea Williams. Sickle cell anemia is an inherited disease. The importance of genetic testing prior to family planning should be emphasized in helping to educate individuals about the natural history of the disease. Currently, it is mandatory in all 50 states to test all newborns for the trait and the disease. Teixeira struggles with the death of her daughter each and every day. She is also dealing with her own medical issues which prevent her from working, plus that of one of her daughters. And that is a sad story, but the moral of the story is please be sure to test and determine whether or not there is sickle cell trait in the family. Our last story today is about one of our favorite people in the sickle cell community, that is Tian T-Boz Watkins, who is planning to do a memoir. And the title of the article is Tian T-Boz Watkins to Dish on Her Incurable Disease, TLC Stardom, and Left Eye's Death in her new memoir. So the way the article reads is, many storms have come and gone, but Tian T-Boz Watkins persevered and has finally opened up about her journey. The TLC singer will release her memoir, A Sick Life, with Rodell in September 2017. I want to hopefully get stuff off my chest and inspire someone at the same time, says Watkins, age 46. A lot of things have happened in my life that will come out in this book, and a lot of people don't know about, that I've never talked about. There are a lot of major life changes that I'm so blessed to have experienced, she said. In addition to dishing on the superstardom and drama she shared with her fellow group members, Rosanda Chili Thomas and the late Lisa Left Eye Lopez, Watkins will also open up about becoming a mother and her debilitating struggle with sickle cell anemia. Since Lopez died in a 2002 car crash, TLC took a hiatus from recording, and in A Sick Life, Watkins will address the void her passing left. As Watkins, who welcomed daughter Chase in 2000, prepares to release her memoir, she and Thomas are busier than ever with TLC. Last year, they toured with New Kids on the Block, and they've been back in the studio with J. Cole, Nayo, and Lady Gaga, working on their first album in 14 years to be released later this year. Ms. Watkins says, "My life has changed for the better in so many ways. I'm so happy right now, I can't even tell you." Here, in this book, the singer opens up about where she is in life now and what fans can expect in her book. When she was asked what fans can expect in the book, she said, "I just turned 46, so just knowing my journey, how the doctor said I wouldn't live past 30, and then the next death rate they told me was 45. I exceeded both of those numbers. They told me I would never have kids. My daughter is 16 this year. They told me I would be disabled. I've traveled around the world, and I'm still doing it. I've survived this crazy brain tumor. I'm living life right now. You'll see how my life has changed and why it's changed for the better." She was also asked, "What misconceptions are you hoping to clear up?" And she said, "There's a lot that people don't understand about sickle cell. I want to really clear it up and hopefully give everyone a better understanding of my disease and what I really went through. I haven't really talked about all the times I could have died, my ICU visits. There are a lot of things I've never shared throughout my career. If I had a bad day on stage, I just let fans think that I had a bad day, but I never really shared that I just got out of the hospital bed or this or that. I don't want them to pity me, so I just take the hit." So we welcome and wish her the very best with her memoir. And we will announce that we have reached out to T-Boz to see if we might be able to get her on the Sickle Cell Action Network sometime in the very near future. We'll hopefully hear back from her, but certainly, whether we do or don't, we wish her the best. She is a great ambassador for sickle cell disease. That's our Sickle Cell News Update for today. We will take a break, and when we come back, we will start speaking with our outstanding guest, Dr. Nicole Law. Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network, and I am Gary A. Gibson, your host, and I'm very thrilled that today we have with us the outstanding Dr. Nicole Law, and also with us today is Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative's Director of Education and Outreach Programs, Ms. Sherry Coleman. Ladies, welcome to the Sickle Cell Action Network.
Thank you.
We're going to start, Nicole, like we generally do, which is we want people that are listening to get to know a little bit about you, so as they hear you, it starts to make sense to them. So please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? How old are you? What is your hemoglobin type?
Yes. Well, good evening, Gary, and thank you, Sherry, the two of you, for having me on the show. I am
It's our pleasure.
Nicole Law, and I was born in Blythesville, Arkansas, and left Blythesville probably at 6 months, and then moved to Gary, Indiana, where I was raised. Went to K-12 education in Gary, Indiana. There I was diagnosed with sickle cell, and I have SS hemoglobin type.
Okay, so you were not diagnosed until you were in grade school?
I was diagnosed at 3.
At 3, okay. We wanted to have you on our show to talk about post-secondary education, and we will get to that shortly. But before we do, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your life with sickle cell. And the first question, are you the only one in your family who has it? If not, how many others are there?
Yes. Growing up, I was the only one that had sickle cell.
Okay.
My mom and dad both, of course, had the trait.
Right.
Didn't know it. And
did you have any brothers and
I
sisters?
have a brother, a half brother,
Okay.
and so he has the trait.
Okay.
And so growing up, the only cousin, the only family member with sickle cell. So that was pretty difficult growing up. However, my son, Kyle, he's 18, he has sickle cell.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So basically, your parents, you say, did not know they had the trait.
They did not know. And in fact, I was in and out of the hospital as a baby with pneumonias, as I was told. And the doctors really didn't know what was going on, what was causing me to come in and out of the hospital and having such low resistance. And every time you looked around, my mom said that I had some type of infection, be it an ear infection or a cold, the pneumonias. And it wasn't until I was 3 years old that I was diagnosed.
Wow. I don't know, Sherry, you had something you wanted to ask her, right?
So she told us that she was 3 years old when she found out. So how old were you when you really started to understand sickle cell and what it meant for your life?
I think I really understood early on. So I would probably say as a primary student, so first, second grade, only because my mom was a science teacher and had gone to school originally for medicine and had to take a body to the morgue and then decided that that was not for her. And so, yes, so having so many credits in the field of science, she became a science teacher. And so very medically abreast and books all throughout our home. But mind you, in the 70s,
Right.
it wasn't a lot of information on sickle
That's
cell.
absolutely true.
And I can remember this little paperback book with this little girl on it and her mom. It was a brown paperback book, and it had Living with Sickle Cell as the subtitle. I don't remember the main title of it, but we would sit down and we would talk about that, because one of the things that I experienced early on is knowing that I couldn't do everything that my peers did, even though I wanted to do those things. There would be repercussions if I did them, such as riding a bike and, possibly falling, or the pedal accidentally hitting your leg. It would be ramifications
Right.
for things such as that were normal. And I would then, suffer that night in excruciating pain. So I knew early on that I had a different life, and that a life with pain and a life of battle. I knew that early on.
So, you talk about how you couldn't do some of the things that the other kids could do. How did that play with you emotionally?
Emotionally, it was rough, because you talk about going to family reunions and your cousins are swimming in the pool,
Right.
and you would get into the pool, but again, you would probably get sick. In extreme heat in the summer, not being able to really be outside with the extreme temperatures, or making sure that you take breaks so you don't get dehydrated and you have your bottled water. So that played a lot with my emotional sense, because, you want to be quote unquote normal,
Right.
or have
Right.
a normal life, but you know that there's an aspect that is keeping you from normalcy.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's touchy, but I think it's important that people realize that a lot of patients that have sickle cell disease go through the exact same thing. So one of the things we're always trying to do here is let people realize they're not alone. And when people share stories like that, then they can sense for real that they're not alone, because pretty much everybody with sickle cell goes through that. Would you mind telling us a little bit about some of your earliest memories of being treated for sickle cell, medically treated? Tell us some of the experiences that you might remember. And we focus a lot on our show, Nicole, about the importance of doctors knowing how to treat patients with sickle cell. And that's really, really important to us. So we like to get a sense for what people have experienced, and we can compare that or contrast that to the way things are now, because things are much better when it comes to treatment. There's still a long way to go, and we know that. But what was it like when you were growing up? Can you remember?
Absolutely. Well, as I said, I grew up in Gary and went to Gary Methodist Hospital. Not very many hospitals in Gary at the time, I think two, but I went to Gary Methodist. I had a pediatrician who was from Haiti, so he was very passionate about sickle cell because he saw the devastation in his country of the impact of sickle cell. And so Dr. Bartholomew was his name, and I kind of had a crush on him. He was a good-looking man.
No wonder you remember his name.
I know. He was a good-looking man and smelled really good.
Okay.
But yeah, he took really good care of me, and I think Dr. Bartholomew, he made it really difficult for other doctors to come behind him because his bedside manner was such of one that really cared about his patients. He took the time out to really understand them and how the illness impacted them as not just a patient but a person. And so I experienced that as a little girl because the minute that I was diagnosed with sickle cell, my mother started, and she was a single mom, she started immediately looking for a hematologist that was a pediatrician. And Dr. Bartholomew, he did not, he wasn't a hematologist, but he specialized in sickle cell. So he just really abreast himself with the illness. And so his bedside manner was unbelievable.
Very
I know,
compassionate.
yes, very compassionate. And for a patient whose father was not in the home, it just drew me even closer to him because he was like that father figure that truly understood, when I'm sick, I'm sick. But when I'm well, I'm well. And so when I'm well, don't treat me like I'm sick.
Right.
But when I'm sick, don't treat me like I'm well.
Right.
And so I remember going to his office for the checkups. I remember being hospitalized, and because my mom was a single mother and I had an older brother, she never stayed at the hospital with me. And so I sometimes, chuckle on the inside at my son because he always has someone staying at the hospital with him. But I never had that, even as a little girl. And I can remember the cages. If you remember the hospital beds with the cages going up, and I would just bawl the rails. Yes, I call them cages. And she would put them up and I would just bawl, and the nurses would come in and sit with me and really comfort me. And so the hospitalizations, even though they were hard to be away from home, it was like my home away from home, and it became my new normal. And so the nurses and their compassion, I think that it came from the head because the doctor was so compassionate, and he provided that example to the nurses that they would come and sit with me. They would rub me down with lotion or alcohol. And I know, now they don't even carry that, like rubbing alcohol on the floors. But they would do things like that, make sure I had my favorite snacks, the nurses. And so even though I was in the hospital, it was a home away from home because they made sure that I was comfortable. And it wasn't like this is just my job, but it was, I truly care about you as a person.
So you had a very, very special doctor. What about some of the other stuff?
Well, the transition from childhood to the teenager years became a little difficult because there were some things that, as a female patient, that I needed that Dr. Bartholomew could not provide, such as a gynecologist. And so finding those type of doctors, it was difficult because my doctor, I put him on a pedestal, and he really set the stage for excellence. And so having other doctors that did not live up to that bedside manner piece was kind of difficult, and I'm sure I gave them a hard time because I am not an easy patient at all, and I have quite high expectations, and I did even as a young girl and a teenager.
So tell us, what about your family? Tell us about how they supported you when you were growing up.
My mother supported me, beyond belief. And I know that I am the woman that I am today because of what my mom instilled in me. One of the things, though, that I can truly say about her and my family is that they had a no excuse mentality. And so with that, when I was well, I had to perform. However, it was that understanding. When I'm sick, I was going to be sick. And so it wasn't that I'm going to do homework in the hospital, I'm going to read in the hospital. No, I was going to get well in the hospital. And so, I see a shift today because they have the school nurses or whatever they're called, but the nurses that come in and they educate the children when they're in the hospital. And I get that, being an educator, but at the same time, I had the experience. When I was in the hospital, the only job that I had to do was get well. But my family, again, they really, really supported me, but it was not a pity party. My mother used to always say, yeah, you can have a party, and everyone has the opportunity to invite who they want to their party, but all parties end. So at some point, that party is going to have to end. And so at some point, you're going to get better. And when you're better, you better perform. And it was just that no excuse mentality.
Which made you who you are today.
Absolutely.
Which is a wonderful human being that we're very glad you're here with us. We're going to take a break, and when we return, we will continue our great discussion with Dr. Nicole.
Hi, I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host for the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. If you are impacted by sickle cell disease in any way, whether you are a patient, a caregiver, or a friend, you need to join me every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I promise that you will find our show to be full of information, perspective, and opinion about all things sickle cell. See you Tuesday right here on RadioNext.tv, the Cool Groove site.
Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host. Sherry, sometimes I just can't imagine that we have this opportunity to do what we do here with the Sickle Cell Action Network. We get to meet and interact with so many cool and interesting people. And today is no exception. Our great guest, Dr. Nicole Law, is just doing it. So let's get right back into it if we can. Our main topic today is post-secondary education, and we're going to get into that now a little bit. And I think we want to start by saying something that we didn't really ask you yet, or we didn't really say yet. What is your doctorate in?
My doctorate is in elementary, no, I take that back. Educational supervision and leadership. I was thinking about my master's.
Okay.
But educational leadership and supervision. What does that mean? The superintendency.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so that's big stuff. So the question starts with, getting an education is often very, very difficult for many sickle cell patients. As I was telling you at the break, we did a needs assessment survey a while back, and we found that 67% of those that took the survey had achieved no more than a high school education. So you've gone much further than that, and we want to learn how you did that. But the first thing we want to do is just say, what was getting an education like for you?
It was difficult at times. Being sick and communicating that to teachers, and having teachers be so understanding to the point where, like I said earlier, when I'm sick, let me be sick. And when I come back, don't bombard me with what was missed. Figure out ways to educate me and get me caught up without the massive workloads of worksheets and makeup tests. And so school became very difficult and discouraging even at an early age, because it was overwhelming to keep up. Mm-hmm. When you're out, you are really sick and you can't do work. And so at that time, it was no differentiation. And, that's teaching to the individual needs. It was a one-size-fits-all. And so that became really difficult to have that size fit me because I was different.
Right. Right.
And so school became really, really difficult academically, but I love the social aspect of school. So I didn't let the the academic piece discouraged me. Then moving on to high school, a little bit behind. I can remember them putting me in middle school before high school, and like the bluebirds or the blackbirds or the ones that can't really read. And my mother was like, this girl can read. I am an educator. She has just missed school. And so she has gaps, but there's nothing wrong with her reading. And I was like, I don't care. Let them put me in the blackbirds, because this is one less rigorous course that I have to take.
Okay.
And so, I was in the little blackbird group in middle school, and it was kind of a joke, but it was a misdiagnosing of what the issue was. The issue, it was gaps, not that I couldn't read.
Right.
And so having educators label you as you can't do something when it is not that you can't, it's just a direct impact of what is going on physically.
Okay.
So that was difficult in elementary school and middle school. High school kind of evened the playing field. However, there were some classes that it was difficult for me to keep up in, just because of the rigor and needing to be there every day. And in a sense, it was a turnoff. It was a turnoff for some teachers. But growing up in Gary public school system, the teachers really were like your second family. It was truly that village. And so because I had teachers that really cared about who I was as a person and built that relationship piece, I wanted to perform in their classroom because I knew that they cared about me. And so that was something that kept me going, because I had so many of them that I knew were encouraging me to make it.
So you had two main driving forces so far from what you just said. Your mother, and then those compassionate teachers that you had that saw you and helped you.
Absolutely.
In a way that others weren't. Interesting.
Yes.
Well, we can get a little bit more specific too. I kind of want to take us through the different phases. And you touched a little bit on grade school, you touched a little bit on middle school, and you touched a little bit on high school. But let's go back and get a little bit more specific with that. So, with your memories of grade school, what was it like for you as a young child? You had that issue of the gaps and them not understanding that it wasn't that you couldn't read, it was the fact that you had these gaps where you weren't able to be at school. So let's say, did you miss a lot of school? Let's start with that.
I missed a significant amount. Growing up, I probably was in the hospital 7 to 8 times a year, so that's pretty significant.
7, 8 times a year.
7 to 8 times a year.
Do you remember how long?
And those durations, they were pretty long. Usually about a week, I would be in the hospital. There was a time when I had a bone infection, and I probably missed about a month of school.
Wow.
I had to learn how to walk all over again.
Wow.
And that was really difficult. At one point, they were talking about holding me back. But because, again, I think about parents who are not true advocates, but my mother was an advocate, and she was an educator. So it was some things that she was just not going to let them do in terms of schooling, and that was one. They put me in the little blackbird group in middle school, but they were not going to hold me back, that's for sure.
Okay. I think Sherry wants to ask you something too.
What do you think your greatest challenge in grade school was? What do you think was your greatest success?
Probably the greatest challenge was knowing that it was that one little thing that set me apart from my classmates, and that one little thing was something that I could not overcome in my head back then. That this was something that I was gonna battle with all throughout my life, and I didn't see any other way other than being a sickle cell patient. And so at that time, I think sickle cell started kind of as a little girl defining me, because I focused on all of the I can'ts. The one thing that was, I think, a true success is that I had a really kind and gentle and sincere personality where my teachers, they liked me. They wanted me to succeed, and because they saw that gentle and kind spirit, and so they built a rapport. They built that rapport, and I was just a likable kid. I was a likable little girl, and so they took really good care of me. The ones that adored me.
That is awesome. And you're still a likable person.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
With the memories that you have, would you say that your grade school, would you say that in grade school you were accommodating to you and your condition? The teachers, were they accommodating to you and your condition?
No, they weren't. I mean, they liked me and all of that. No, they weren't. They liked me, but when I can remember my mom actually. And I wish she was here today, and I would just shake my finger at her. But she gave me a packet of spelling words. And I was a elementary school principal, and we didn't even do spelling. We didn't teach spelling. But back then, mind you, this is the 70s. Sherry's looking at me like, what? You don't teach spelling? No, that's what you have spell check for, okay? You don't waste time in the school day teaching spelling. But back in the 70s, they did. And so I had missed all of these days, let's just say 5 days. And so I had a packet of spelling worksheets that I had to do. And so my mother was like, you better get your packet done because you will take those spelling tests and you have to do well. And it was just, one thing after another. And I looked at her and I said, no one cares about these spelling worksheets. And I threw them across the room. Yeah, and I almost went into another sickle cell crisis because she beat my butt so bad that night.
I'm sure she did.
And I thought I was going to have another sickle cell crisis.
Because you're talking about back in the 70s.
Because we were talking about back in the 70s. But it was things like that. There is no way that a teacher should send home that much makeup work for a child that is suffering with an illness in the hospital. There should be some other type of individual educational plan to get them caught up without overwhelming them. So now you have this, incident in the home between parent and student because of this makeup work, because there's a lack of information or a lack of, knowing what should have been done to get me caught up. And so that, I experienced that a lot of times.
I'm wondering, Nicole, is that something that maybe is still an issue with sickle cell patients and being able to get an education where
Absolutely.
It's that overwhelming thing that turns them off of the whole thing?
Yes.
And because the teachers are still not really being accommodating enough?
Yes, absolutely. There is no way that a child who has been hospitalized should come back to school and have an immense amount of makeup work to do on top of what's still going on in the school.
Right.
And the day-to-day work. So there needs to be something. How is that student going to show or gain proficiency when they are out? And I know that is still happening today. I saw it with my own son.
Okay. Okay.
So what about your grade school friends? Did they know you had sickle cell? And how did they treat you?
They did. I had some that were really, really good friends, and then some children were children, and they were really mean, thinking that they could catch the disease and didn't want to be my friend or be close to me because they thought that they would contract the disease, and not understanding, and just that kind of bullying mentality where, some of them kind of knew you were a little weaker vessel. And so it was some meanness going on. But I think children are mean in school. But it's, how do you overcome and not pay attention to what's being said or what's being done as long as you're not being hurt. And I wasn't ever hurt physically.
Right.
This is an issue. I want to get into your head just a little bit more, Nicole, if you let us. But what we see a lot of times, and we've talked about this on the show quite a bit, is that there are some sickle cell patients, a fair percentage of them, who actually don't like to let people know they have the disease. But it sounds to me like you were letting people know. What was it that What's the difference? Why was it okay for you to do it, and why is it not okay for other sickle cell patients to do that?
You know, Gary, I think about that quite often because when I hear in the sickle cell community here in Indianapolis, when I think about that, I don't understand why is it such a secret and why are people, you know, ashamed of it?
Right.
And because we are very vocal with other conditions.
Right.
And so I really don't understand that. And I think with me, it was just my mother and my family. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't something that should be shunned. And I heard my mom explain to others that I had it. And, you know, she celebrated me when I was well and took care of me when I was sick. And so it wasn't something that I grew up being ashamed of. It was a part of who I was. And as I got older, I learned that sickle cell does not define me.
Right.
It does not define me. So if it doesn't define me, if it's a piece of me, then just like everyone sees your personality and everyone, they know your faith or some of your beliefs or your lines in the sand. Why not know that you have this battle? Because it makes you a warrior.
Yes, it does.
And so I think because I look at the young people, it is probably because the things that they can't do, that they focus on that, and that limitation where is probably some embarrassment.
We've said this before, and this is a part of why I want to keep bringing this out, is people give money, time, effort to things they care about. And if they're living amongst someone that has a disease like sickle cell and they don't know it, how would they care? Why would they care? But if they are aware of it, I'm pretty certain that a good number of those people will say, hey, what can I do to help? Because I like you and I don't like what's happening to you and I want to do something about it. We've had many people contact us over the years to say, I want to help because so-and-so had sickle cell or so-and-so has sickle cell. But if that person didn't know that the person they know had sickle cell, they're not inclined to help. There's a million other things that they can do with their money and their time. So to me, that's one of the reasons why it's important to speak up. It helps the cause to speak up. You agree?
I agree. In fact, I live by, I call them the 4 P's, and I wrote them down. And no, actually it's the 5 P's.
Okay.
And the first one is I pray. Because I have a significant faith in God and His healing virtue. The second one is persistence. And so I persist. And everyone that knows me, one of my favorite sayings is, no has never killed anybody. So I am going to ask whatever it is that comes to my mind that I feel like asking. And that's all you can do is tell me no. And no has never killed me. And no does not hurt as much as that sickle cell pain. Okay? Right. And the third one is persevere. And I said, I say often, Nicole, what's the difference between perseverance and persistence? Persistence involves other people. Perseverance is within. And so persevering,
well said.
Yeah, it is. Persistence involves you and I, an interaction between us. Perseverance is that internal piece. And so, persevere. So even though it's hard, even though you struggle with pain, even though it might take you 6 years instead of 4 years to complete the degree, persevere. And who cares about time limits? Who cares about the when? We put those stipulations on ourselves. The fourth one is prioritize. So what does that mean? A lot of people talk about, you can manage your time. You can't manage time. Time is stagnant. You get 24 hours. Everybody gets 24 hours, right? What we manage, and I get so sick of books that talk about time management, but we don't manage time, we manage our priorities. And so one of the things that I had to learn to truly be a successful student, and I didn't learn this in college, my first go around with my bachelor's, I learned it well after I was unsuccessful, well after I had to come home because grades were not up to par, is that I have to stay ahead of the game. Because I may be sick the day of the final. I may be sick that week that I should be studying for the finals. And so I have to stay ahead of the game. And so that means prioritization. I have to prioritize. And that's kind of hard. That's hard for a young person to understand that concept of prioritization. And then the last one gets back to what you're saying, Gary, and that's publicize. I don't keep that I have sickle cell a secret. It's on my Facebook in September, Sickle Cell Awareness Month. Wear red lipstick. If I could partner up with MAC Makeup, it would be By the Blood lipstick, and it would be red just for the month of September, and it would be bright red. And so publicize is that fourth P, because I believe, just like you, that people need to know that A, you're an overcomer, but B, you have some limitations.
Right. Very, very well done. Those 5 Ps are awesome. Thank you for that. We're going to take a break here at the Sickle Cell Action Network. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host, and we'll be back. Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host. The Sickle Cell Action Network show is sponsored by Mass Therapeutics, a publicly traded biopharmaceutical company headquartered in San Diego, California. MAST is currently leveraging the molecular adhesion and sealant technology platform derived from over 2 decades of clinical, non-clinical, and manufacturing experience with purified and non-purified polaximers. MAST has developed a drug called MST-188 as a candidate for serious or life-threatening diseases with significant unmet needs. Among those needs is the treatment of sickle cell disease. MAST has enrolled sickle cell patients in a clinical trial known as EPIC. EPIC stands for Evaluation of Purified Polaximer in Crisis. If successful, EPIC could result in the first treatment of its kind to treat sickle cell disease patients while they are in crisis. The EPIC study aims to determine whether MST-188 can shorten the duration of a painful crisis. MST-188 is an investigational drug that has not been approved for commercial sale in any jurisdiction for any use. MST-188 potentially improves oxygen delivery, and it may help keep blood vessels from becoming blocked and more obstructed. It may improve blood flow by stopping cells from grouping together. It may also reduce inflammation, and it may restore cell membranes and give damaged cells time to heal. EPIC participants continue to receive their normal pain treatments during crisis, and their participation is free of charge to them. The patients involved in the EPIC study may not only be helping themselves, but they might also be helping future generations of those yet to be born. If you are interested in learning more about the EPIC study, please visit www.theepicstudy.com. Thank you to Mass Therapeutics, and we will say that we are anxiously awaiting the results of the trial that we just referred to, which we understand should be coming out very, very soon. We're hoping for very good news. So we're going to continue speaking with Dr. Nicole Law. She's been very gracious with her time and herself and her open answers, and we appreciate that. Did you miss a lot of school during your high school years? We covered grade school. Now let's talk about high school. Did you miss a lot of school during your high school years?
One thing about high school, and I know we'll get to this, but my young adulthood, what I experienced when I really got into my teen years, out of the preteen into the teen years, was inconsistencies with my health.
Okay.
So times where I would be sick a lot in a year, and then other times maybe only having 2 to 3 hospitalizations. So a lot of inconsistencies, and I don't know if that was because of, really getting into puberty and, having your menstrual cycle, but a lot of inconsistencies with that. So like my freshman year, I missed a lot of school. Then that tapered my sophomore year. Junior year, started missing a lot. Then senior year, not so much.
Okay. Would you say that the teachers and staff were caring, and did they work with you to help you succeed during that time?
That's when I really experienced, Gary, teachers that were like family members.
Okay.
Not so much in elementary, and definitely not middle school. Middle school, I believe, was the roughest experience, and that probably is true for children that don't have illnesses. That those are just difficult grades. But high school is when I really formed strong relationships and bonds with my teachers, and so they were very understanding. And a lot of them, too, my mother was a high school science teacher, so they were her colleagues. She wasn't at that particular high school in the Gary School Corporation, but they knew each other. So probably that relationship facilitated some of that, the rapport with them and me.
So they had a little bit extra of compassion because of that connection.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Nicole, what do you think were your greatest challenge in high school, or what do you think were your greatest success?
My greatest challenge, Sherry, was the fact that I did not let sickle cell get me down. I was doing everything that my peers were doing, from being on the dance team to enjoying being a teenager, the extracurricular pieces, the parties, the friendships, all of the social aspects of it. And so that, and I say, why is that a challenge, is because I paid for it. Afterwards. I paid for it. So if I hung out on the weekends, or, sometimes after a dance squad doing moves that exerted me, I was going to pay for it. But I didn't let that stop me. So that was a challenge, even though on the outside it looked as if it was a strength, but it was really a challenge, because I was going to have to experience pain as a result of a decision that I made.
And you knew that,
and I knew it.
And still did it.
And still did it. I knew it, because at the time, and I see this a lot even in my son, but at the time, what I experienced in that decision that was made far outweighed what I was going to experience with my sickness.
Okay.
And the success?
The success, I would say, high school, I didn't have a lot of academic successes. I have to admit that. In fact, I didn't have a significant GPA. I can remember my counselor telling me, oh, you should just go and collect disability because you probably don't have the GPA or the wherewithal to go off to school. And so looking at the paper, I didn't have a lot of successes. In the transcripts, I didn't have a glowing GPA. I didn't have really good grades. And I'm sure there were times that I never used my sickness as an excuse. I never faked like I was sick. None of that. I just didn't believe in that, because I believed in, what goes around comes around, and this karma. So don't, act sick and you're not really. But with that, I just think that my success was that perseverance piece, even though I had some adults, not really my teachers, but the people that were in decision making that would, help you know what your future would hold. So the counselors, the principals or assistant principals, they really didn't have a belief that I would do well.
Did that motivate you in some type of way?
It did. It motivated me. So really not being able to say true successes, because when I think of the question that you're asking about success, I'm thinking academic success.
Yeah,
and
success is relative.
It is, isn't it? So I would say the ability to move beyond my sickness, that was a success. And being able to say, you know what, I'm going to make this decision, even if that decision that I make is going to have some ramifications, and cause me not to be well or cause me to be sick, I'm just going to have to deal with it. This is the hand that I've been dealt, and this is the card that I'm going to play, and then I'm going to have to deal with if I win or lose in this situation.
Let's talk about your high school friends. Did they know you have sickle cell?
Oh, yeah, they did. And they took really good care of me. Some of them are probably listening today.
Cool.
Yes, they took really good care of me. I would be at a party, and at times I would get sick, and they would take care of me. They would come up to the hospital and bring me all of my goodies, from the J's, potato chips, and the hot popcorn, and all the stuff that I shouldn't have, and stay beyond visiting hours. So quite supportive. Yes.
And that makes a difference.
It does.
Yeah, it does. So Nicole, let's talk about college now.
Yes.
We've gone through grade school, and we've gone through middle school, and we've gone to high school. Now let's talk about college. It often seems that the earlier years of a sickle cell patient's education are typically easier than when they go to college. Would you say that that was true for you?
Yes.
Go to college. Would you say that that was true for you?
Yes, it was, because
So you've already had hard times going through all of these.
I did.
Yeah.
But again, I have to attribute everything back to my mother being that advocate, because, to be honest, Gary, I did not feel that I was academically prepared for college.
Okay.
And some of that was not a result of the hospitalizations.
Okay.
It was a result of that P in not prioritizing.
Okay.
And not necessarily leveraging the times that I was well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that well growing up. So I really didn't feel like I was prepared for college. And so now I go into a community, a college community, where sickle cell is not known.
Where did you go?
I went to IU Bloomington,
Uh-huh.
and then I transferred and went to IUPUI.
Okay.
And both experiences were pretty much the same. And it felt like professors really didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
It was, okay. You know, even though I publicized, communicated that I had sickle cell, it was okay. And
so what?
Yeah. And I didn't have back then, even though my mom was an advocate, we knew nothing about disability services like they have now. So growing up, I didn't have an IEP. We didn't talk about that. But now I know a lot of the sickle cell patients, they have the IEPs and individualized educational plan for their other health impairment. And it's not looked at like you have a learning disability anymore. It's just you have a health issue.
Right.
So we didn't have exposure to any of those opportunities, and so college was really difficult because I had some professors that did not care, did not care at all. And there was a time that I got really, really ill, and I tell this story often, but I had a bone infection, and this was after I kind of got serious about school, because in the beginning I wasn't really all that serious about school and had to come home, and so went home and worked for a little bit after my freshman year because I didn't do well, but I saw that I did not want to work that hard. All of my friends were hanging out during the Thanksgiving break and Christmas break, and I had to go to work, and I'm like, oh no, this is not for me. I'm going back to college. So I went back and went to IUPUI, and during that time, I got really, really sick. I had a bone infection in my hip, and so another bone infection. And so the doctor said, you have to have antibiotics probably for the next 3 weeks to a month. And I said, I cannot miss school. I'm working on my degree, and this is going to set me back. And so they said, well, what we can do is home health care, but you're going to have to give yourself an IV antibiotics every 4 hours. And so we consented to that. My mom was not happy, but she said, you're going to do whatever you want to do, because that persistence, And so I took home all of the IV fluids, got home health care, and every 4 hours on IUPUI's campus, I had to give myself IV antibiotics. So I had a port in my chest, and I would go to the bathroom when it was time for me to take my antibiotic, hang the antibiotic bag on the purse hook of the restroom stall, and give myself intravenous fluids, because I wanted to finish, and because I had professors that did not care, and I knew that I would have either gotten an F or an incomplete.
That is perseverance.
What was your major?
Elementary education.
Wow.
Why'd you pick that?
Well, I originally thought I wanted to be a physical therapist, but I knew I had started taking classes for physical therapy, and then I was going to move into the field of hematology. And I was so sick in college where I knew that I was not going to be able to physically help someone else get well.
Okay.
And so I changed my major. I said, not that teaching is easy by any means, but I knew that I could maneuver the teaching field if I were sick.
What would you say was the most difficult part of going to college for you, and how did you maneuver around the obstacles?
One of the difficulties, many, but one of the difficulties, again, was what I would consider a success in being social and personable and wanting to fit in and, do the normal things that college students did. It was when I paid for it this time by being sick. I'm going to hospitals and doctors that know nothing really about sickle cell anemia. So whereas back home in Gary, my doctors knew my medical plan, whereas doctors in Bloomington didn't know. And so what could have been a 2-day stay ended up being an 8-day stay just because of the unawareness of what to do for me medically.
Well, did you inform your professors about your situation? And you said they didn't care, so obviously you tried to inform them. You publicized your
Yes.
and so they just didn't work with you? Is that kind of what we're saying here? Is they didn't really work with you?
I hate to put that on individuals, educators especially, because I know that educators go into the profession typically because they care about children and they care about the service of educating others. But what it felt like to me is, not that they didn't care, but they didn't do anything about it. There was not another plan. So I don't know if they were educated. It just felt like it was one size fits all again. And if you don't fit into this size, then, oh well.
You're SOL. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Sickle Cell Action Network. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host. We're going to take another break, and then when we return, we will talk with Dr. Nicole Law. I'm your host, Gary A. Gibson. The Sickle Cell Action Network is brought to you as a service from Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We are a 47-year-old community-based organization that provides services to people with sickle cell disease. We also provide education and outreach, and we also do advocacy on behalf of those that have sickle cell disease. We're also really promoting our 20th annual Sickle Cell 5K Walk Run here in Indianapolis on June 25th at Riverside Park, and we're certainly hoping that everybody within the sound of this station in Indianapolis and central Indiana is going to be there. And certainly we hope to see Nicole Law there, as well as everybody else that's listening. That will be our 20th anniversary, and we're hoping to make it the biggest and best ever. So thank you to Martin Center Sickle Cell Initiative for working with RadioNext.tv and Mass Therapeutics to bring us the Sickle Cell Action Internet Radio Show. We're speaking with Dr. Nicole Law, and we're taking the steps level by level through her education to figure out how it is that she was able to gain her PhD, and we're going to go back where we left off. And the question now, Dr. Law, is what would you say was your greatest challenge while in college, and what do you think was your greatest success?
Okay, so we talked about the challenge being
how the professors didn't care.
Right. Yeah, not making the accommodation and me not prioritizing. So I have to take some responsibility for that, not really prioritizing the way I should have the work and looking at each of those course syllabus or syllabi and not leveraging that I knew what needed to be done up front. So that was something that was truly a struggle, and that's advice that I would give other sickle cell patients, is just to leverage knowing ahead of time of what needs to be done. But I think the success is that I had a can-do spirit. I had a can-do
obvious.
spirit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and then for others to say what I wasn't going to do just made me even more motivated, and it empowered me to show you that I am going to do this, and that I'm a warrior for sickle cell. And again, I know that when I'm sick, I am sick, But when I'm well, I'm well. And so now I need to maximize the time that I'm well.
So someone like telling you you can't is like you hearing I will.
It is.
Amen.
I
Amen.
can attest to that.
Yeah, amen. So let's then go on and ask you this. Now that we've gotten you through college, we're now into grad school. And what was your greatest challenge while in grad school? And then success.
Yeah. Well, challenge in grad school, and this is probably any working student, it was balancing, because by this time, you hear as a college student, get your bachelor's first and then don't go all the way through. Get a job. That's what you hear. Our community, they are big advocates of getting a job and not going straight through. It would have been nice for me to go straight through, but that's not what I was told. So managing being a wife at the time, as well as a young mother, and having a child with sickle cell. So now that really impacted my life even more. But balancing all of those on top of knowing that there were going to be times that I was going to be hospitalized and that I couldn't do the work. So that was a huge challenge, being able to, think about that prioritization, because now prioritization is impacted by 3 other huge commitments and dynamics.
Correct. Wow.
So you're married?
Yes.
Okay, and you have a son with sickle cell that you mentioned too. Let's talk about your husband. He has to be a very devoted husband and a father, and he's a principal at a local high school, so
Yes.
he's very successful as that as well. What does it look like to live in such a dynamic family?
Oh, we have to have a sense of humor. Everyone tells us you guys are crazy. And so we do. We have to laugh. We have to be transparent with each other.
Okay.
I have to. I can't at home fake it until I can make it. I do that all throughout the day. All throughout the day I may have pain, but I have to fake it until I can make it. And what does that mean? You're looking at me like, what does that mean, Nicole? It means that I have to push through the pain. If the pain is not such where I am in the hospital, I'm pushing through it.
Okay.
And so, but that can be pain every single day that I experience. And so I have to learn to live with a little bit of pain. One of my pastors often would say, we have to learn to play hurt. And so there are times where I have had to truly learn to play hurt, because with sickle cell, you're never really free from some type of pain. And I don't think people realize that. And if it's not pain, it may be fatigue. If it's not fatigue, it is your resistance are low. It's always something to impact you physically. And so at home, I have to be transparent and say, I can't do this because I'm not feeling well. I that's one place where I cannot fake it until I can make it. I have to be truthful. My hip is hurting. I have a headache, and push beyond. But also, I think in our home is not letting that be an excuse. Okay. So even though I may be having pain, okay, how am I going to push beyond this to still enjoy being a mother, still enjoy being a wife, and enjoy being a friend? And so it's playing both hands.
Right.
It really is. It's a juggling act.
Nicole, you just did a really good job, I think, of explaining that either you're in pain or your resistance is low, you're anemic, whatever. All of these things are always there. And that must bring a certain amount of anxiety to you on a daily basis as well. And that's something that I personally am really concerned about, that, I don't think this gets enough attention, that people with sickle cell disease have this generally high level of anxiety about, well, am I going to get sick again? And if so, when? How long is it going to last? How bad is it going to hurt? Or am I going to be able to have enough energy to do what I want to do next weekend? Those kinds of things are always there. How do you balance that?
I think as a young person, I just did it. I don't think I was really anxious
You didn't really
about
think
it.
about it. You
I
just
really
did it.
didn't think about
Okay.
it. And I think that just is youth.
Mm-hmm.
As probably a teenager, there would be times that I would think about it, but I just did things anyway. I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, I had a nonchalant attitude about it and say, if that's the case, then I'll just deal with it. I believe that now it is shifted, and I find myself, and my faith is stronger than it's ever been. And so I don't understand why at times, I guess it's just innate, but I find myself being really anxious as an adult with sickle cell, and the older I get, being more anxious. And I really believe, Gary, it is because a lack of communication and education to the adult sickle cell patient. Everybody cares about the babies.
Yes.
Everybody cares about the kids. Everybody cares about the teenagers, making sure the teenagers experience prom and making sure that they graduate and have their open houses. And then you step into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And one may say, okay, Nicole, what's next? And, you've gotten your PhD, what's next? And I'm asking myself what's next, but it's not about what's next in my career, what's next in education. I'm asking myself what's next as far as my illness is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a scary place at times. And even though, I know what God's word says, to be anxious for nothing. And then I find myself being anxious because of the unknown. Because no one, I asked one of the doctors at Indiana Hemophilia and Thrombosis Center, I said, who's your oldest sickle cell patient? And I know HIPAA and all of that, but tell me a little bit about them. Because I was always told, A, that I wouldn't live past 17. Then 17 came and left. Then I was told, well, you wouldn't be able to have a child. And, now my son is 18, even though he struggles with sickle cell. Then I was told, well, you probably won't live past 35. And now I'm 46. So I wanted to know, who's your oldest sickle cell patient? Because there's a curiosity, and I want to find out what are some of their struggles. Because you hear how people overcome as kids, and you hear the research for children and the Baby Hugs program and all of these, but you really don't experience it as an adult, and it's kind of a scary place, Gary.
Yeah, I know it is, and it's a real concern for us. Is we look at this and we see it's great that there is so much attention given to kids, but there is a big void for those that are adults, and we're worried about that. We work on that. Did you get an answer from the doctors as to who the oldest patient was?
Yes, I did, and I was able at the conference to meet the oldest person.
Great.
And she looks lovely and
Yes.
has a great spirit,
Yeah.
and it's encouraging. And so, one of the things that I would like to do is, and I know that you have a network at the Martin Center, but I really think that connecting and mentorship and really involving patients of all ages and having them share their experiences, that is, especially that mentoring piece.
Yes.
That's pretty significant, because it's discouraging when, and I've heard people talk about, on Facebook, when you see patients struggle, or you hear patients who lost their battle to sickle cell, and they were only, and you fill in the blank with the only.
Right.
Your story,
Yeah.
and that is discouraging, and it makes one anxious.
But you persevere. And
But,
that
yes,
is the,
I did.
That is the important thing.
Yes, I did.
That is so important. Thank you for that. I think would like to ask you now, tell us about your work. What do you do for a living?
Yeah. Well, you heard me say I was an educator. So I started my career. I really love children and love education, and because I thought I wanted to be that physical therapist, had all of those credits for science, so I ended up becoming a science teacher in the MSD of Wayne Township. So I taught 8th grade science and 9th grade biology, and then I knew that I wanted to be an administrator, and so I became an assistant principal and then a principal for a little under 10 years. Then I went to central office because I thought I wanted to be a superintendent. That's why I got the PhD in educational leadership and supervision. And so I was doing a lot of professional development in my district, hiring consultants. And one day, a consultant said, you know, Nicole, you should really think about coming to consult with our educational firm. And it was this little voice in my head that said, Nicole, you probably can't do that because that's going to require a lot of travel. And you know that the doctors have told you, you cannot get in airplanes, you cannot fly, and you have not flown very many times. And the first time that you flew, you had a major sickle cell crisis. And so how are you going to do that? And you have to fly all over the country, educating teachers and principals and superintendents. And like you said earlier, the I can't became I will. And you know what? If I'm sick, they have hospitals all across the country, so I'll just go to the hospital. And I've been sick, so the question is, what do I do? I'm an educational consultant, and I work with schools and districts on professional learning. So getting better.
All around the country.
All around the country, yes.
Thank you for being here with us. We're going to take a break, and when we return, we'll continue our discussion with Dr. Nicole and start wrapping up our show. Welcome back to the Sickle Cell Action Network Internet Radio Show. I'm Gary A. Gibson, your host, and we are speaking with Dr. Nicole Law, Ph.D. And we're very happy that we're here speaking with her, and she is sharing lots of information, and she is bearing her soul for us, and we really appreciate that. Nicole, we want to shift our focus now back to sickle cell, if that's okay with you. How do you describe sickle cell to other people that you encounter?
Well, Gary, I think I give them the medical definition or as close to it. I tell them it is a genetic disorder. And so I start with the genetic disorder just because of the perception that it's something that you can contract or catch from someone, because I experienced that growing up. So making sure that they know that it's a genetic disorder that you have to get from both parents. I always talk about the recessive gene, and so that's probably that medical or science teacher coming out in me. That really affects everything about who you are. Everything from your growth to sometimes your appearance with the yellow eyes, the jaundice, to your stamina. And so I explain all of that. And then how it has episodes where you have debilitating pain that is so excruciating that you can't walk, you can't move, it's painful to be touched. And so I go into a lengthy description.
Good, that's good. Let me ask you, I asked this question of a lot of our patient guests. How do you describe the pain?
Oh, like someone stabbing you constantly with the sharpest knife that you've ever seen in your life. And it's continuous stabbing.
Okay.
So from your perspective, what do you think is the hardest part about living with sickle cell, and why is that so?
The hardest part is the uncertainty of what's going to happen tomorrow. And the pain that no matter how hard you try to stay healthy, you just may have an episode and you can't ever depict what brought on that episode. I mean, you can, maybe,
you can,
maybe I got cold, maybe, what you can sometimes, but there are times that I can do everything right in my mind and still have a pain crisis. And because I am the type of person that I like to control things, that is something in my life that I cannot control. Just to be transparent.
And that's hard too when you're a controlling type of person, right?
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot about you that is inspiring to me.
Thank you.
And I commend you for being such a strong sickle cell adult role model.
Thank you.
That also comes with a little bit of a responsibility. My question, what words of advice would you have for young girls living and growing up with sickle cell?
Yes. So what advice would I have young girls? One, thing that I would tell them to continue to be kind and gentle and not let their battle make them bitter.
Definitely.
Don't let it make you bitter, and look at ways to become better. How might you become better? You become better by having a dream and believing that you can achieve whatever it is that you dream. It may take you longer, but that's okay.
Did you read my closing statement for today?
I did not.
Okay, go ahead.
Great minds think alike, huh?
Yes.
Yes. But believe, dream, and achieve. Achieve that dream. It may take longer, but that's okay. Who put you on a time limit? Who put you on a time frame? And don't let others define who you are.
That's the most important one, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's imagine then that you had a chance to get interviewed on Good Morning America.
Ooh.
What would you tell the audience about what people living with sickle cell need? What do people living with sickle cell need?
We need compassion, but not pity. We need understanding, and we need support. And in that support will come in different shapes, and it's not a one size fits all. So get to know the person. Get to know the person and support them based on who they are and what they need. Have compassion for them and know that they're going to have some struggles. But then celebrate them when they're well. Celebrate their drive and their stick-to-itiveness. And be a champion. Be a champion for sickle cell and communicate that this is an illness. This is a disease that has impacted many.
Many.
Exactly, many. And think about where it is in this space of sickle cell anemia, where you fit and where you can help and support.
Very well said. Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure to have you here this evening.
Thank you, Sherry.
Is there anything that you would like to add to today's show, or something we haven't talked about?
Well, when I think about sickle cell and my life as a sickle cell patient, I just would like to tell the sickle cell community again. I probably said this earlier, but don't let this illness define you. Think of ways that you can overcome, and what does overcoming look like for you. Don't let anyone put you in a box, and don't let anyone tell you that you cannot do whatever it is that you want to do. And continue just to dream and think big and push beyond the label of a sickle cell patient.
Right. Well said.
Dr. Nicole Law, it's been our pleasure to have you on the Sickle Cell Action Internet Radio Show today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You've done
you.
a great job. As usual, it's time to close out our show and just sort of have this thing about closing out the show and giving people something to think about. So bear with me and you'll see why I said what I said a couple of seconds ago. Our closing quote is spawned by a quote from Herbie Hancock. And the quote says, "Forget about trying to compete with someone else. Create your own pathway. Create your own new vision." Herbie Hancock is an American pianist, keyboardist, bandleader, composer, and actor. Starting his career with Donald Byrd, he shortly thereafter joined the Miles Davis Quintet when Hancock helped to redefine the role of a jazz rhythm section and was one of the primary architects of the post-bop sound. He was one of the first jazz musicians to embrace synthesizers and funk music. If you have sickle cell disease, let me ask you, what is your vision for your life? Do you see yourself as just a sickly person, or do you see yourself as one who has something special to offer to all the rest of us? Is your view of yourself within the world controlled by what happened yesterday, or is it colored by the possibilities of what can happen today and tomorrow? I ask these questions because I think it might help set the groundwork for a new and improved you. So many times we get stuck thinking about our limitations, and that is not a good thing. In a way, limitations are like a fence that surrounds a house. That fence can persuade people to stay off your property, but it doesn't keep you from leaving your house if you want to do so. In fact, there is usually a way to get to the other side of a fence. Most fences have at least one gate, but even for those that don't have gates, there are still ways to get over to the other side. You can climb under it, or you can climb over it. If you can't do either, then you just have to get to work on making a hole in that fence. It might be hard to bust a hole in a real-life concrete fence, but even that can still happen. Sledgehammers and explosives can usually take care of that. The physical limitations of a chronic illness like sickle cell are real. There is no denying that. But it doesn't mean that those emotional limitations can't be opened up at least a little bit. I'm talking here about our attitudes. That is where many of our limitations are born, and that is where many of them stay. And they will stay there for as long as we allow them to. To many, the emotional burdens that come with sickle cell and other chronic disorders are like that concrete fence that I mentioned. For some, the emotional burdens have built a fence around them, and that fence might be keeping them from being able to explore the world outside of their own backyard. But it doesn't have to stay that way. That's where visioning comes in. You have the power to break through that concrete wall if you want to. Start by thinking of your limitations as nothing more than an imaginary concrete wall. Then, in your mind, envision that you have placed some dynamite at the wall's base. Step back to a safe distance and set off the explosion, and boom! There is now a big gaping hole in your wall of limitation. Sound too easy to be true? Maybe, but not really. Remember, our imaginary dynamite is blowing a hole in our imaginary wall of limitations. And it all starts with a vision and a belief that it is possible to do so. After you have blown a hole in your fence, you are now free to be who you want to be and do what you want to do. Envision how you want your story to be told and then start living it that way. Take Herbie Hancock's advice and create your own pathway to create your own vision. This is a choice that any of us can always make. Why not start making yours today? Why not start now with your new vision, your new dream for yourself? After all, as they always say, it never hurts to dream. And remember, it always hurts more when the dreaming stops. Don't stop dreaming, and don't stop reaching for the greatest version of who you still can become. That's our show for today. Please join us again next week, same time, same station.